Well, very good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the GMC membership meeting for May. My name is Dave Anderson. I'm the board chair of GMC. I'd like to welcome everyone to the historic WEC Energy Public Service Building, and a special welcome to the new GMC members who are here today. Scott Lauber, who's at my table, Susan Ramp, and Dan Steer, President and CIO of Operos Advisors. I think he was over here somewhere. There he is. We're looking forward to including your perspective in the work of the GMC, so thanks for joining. Today's meeting brings a certain energy. Right? Wow, I thought it was good. Of growth and collaboration. We hear the news of data center development in Wisconsin, but most of us aren't directly engaged with these projects, though we hear a lot about them. As the digital infrastructure and economy evolves throughout the region, it was important for us to take the time today to have a thorough conversation about what this means for our region. We don't have our typical prompted table discussion today, and as it turns out, we don't have lunch out there yet either. But we're gonna take about 10 minutes in the middle of the meeting for some networking at your tables. I now introduce Christy Garcia-Thomas, interim president of the GMC, to share strategic updates and introduce today's program.
Thank you, Dave. And I want to wish all the fabulous women in the room a happy belated Mother's Day. I hope you were treated especially well and got to sit back and relax, because I know how much work you do from 9 to 5 during the weekdays. I also want to thank our hosts for today, Scott Lauber and Peggy Kelsey, for not only hosting us, but helping to curate an impressive panel of experts who will educate us in many aspects of data centers. This happens to be our largest crowd so far this year, so thank you for that, and thanks to our panelists for helping to drive such great attendance. But before we hear from them, we have some strategic updates to share. Related to infrastructure, we have officially welcomed Steve Radke, who I know is here today as a co-chair of the Infrastructure Committee, along with John Kissinger. The two are preparing the Infrastructure Committee for the pending work on 794 and Lakefront Gateway. On fiscal strength, we've met with Mayor Johnson's team to identify next steps in supporting innovative growth that leads to a stronger and more sustainable fiscal position for the city. In addition, we are exploring a big picture strategy addition to our work that will support the Milwaukee's footprint for generations to come. Regarding education, we recently met with MPS Superintendent Dr. Brenda Casilius and our Operational Review Committee to discuss updates and needs in advance of the release of the MPS budget later this month. We are still looking for just 4 more GMC members who are interested in serving as an executive coach for members of MPS leadership team. We know that MPS has a limited budget, and this mentoring program helps provide professional development training without affecting their bottom line. The time commitment is minimal, about 1 hour per month, and if you're interested in becoming a mentor, please let us know. Before we break for lunch, which I really hope is here by the time we break, I would like to turn the microphone over to one of today's meeting hosts, Scott Lauber, Chairman and CEO of WEC Energy Group. Scott was named President and Chief Executive Officer of WEC Energy Group and appointed to the Board of Directors in February 2022. He previously served as Senior Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer. In these roles, Scott was responsible for information technology, major projects, power generation, supply chain, supplier diversity, and WEC infrastructure and fuels. He served as president of We Energy's Wisconsin Public Service, Upper Michigan Energy Resource, from January 2022 to April 2024, and as president of Michigan Gas Utilities and Minnesota Energy Resources from January 2022 to May 2025. Scott joined Wisconsin Energy Corp in 1990. He has spent more than 3 decades with the company, holding leadership roles across finance, operation, and corporate strategy before becoming CEO and chairman. Scott is known for his focus on grid reliability, disciplined investment, and advancing a balanced energy transition while maintaining affordability. He is actively engaged in regional economic development efforts and works closely with business and civic leaders to ensure the infrastructure powering our economy keeps pace with growth and innovation. Scott graduated with honors from the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater and holds a Bachelor of Business Administration degree in accounting. He is also a certified public accountant. Scott is on the board of directors of American Transmission Company, Metropolitan Milwaukee Association of Commerce, and United Way of Greater Milwaukee and Waukesha County, for which he served as co-chair of in 2025 Community Campaign. Thank you, Scott. I am proud to be a WEC board member and have had the pleasure of working directly with Scott. He is a true asset to the WEC organization and to our community, and we are glad to be joined by him today as a new member of the GMC. Please welcome Scott.
Well, thank you. You can tell that lunch isn't here yet because she gave every word of my bio that was there. And for a CPA, hopefully I'm not as boring, but you'll be the judge of that. So as you walked into the building today, you saw the big doors on the side of the building. That's where the streetcars used to come in. And when you walk through the doors, you looked on the left and there's an entry area there. That's where we used to show people how to use these electric appliances, electricity, right? That's the history of why we came out with the cookie book, a little more excitement. How do you cook with electricity? So our foundation goes back 130 years. We have grown tremendously over that 130 years. Oops. Maybe not. So when you think about our company, if we measure electricity in a measure called gigawatts, it's a lot of, your house is in kilowatts, and then it's megawatts, and then it's a gigawatt. It's a huge number. It took us 130 years to get the size of this company through acquisitions, through the Industrial Revolution, through adding air conditioning across the universe here, across the state of Wisconsin, to get to 7.5 gigawatts. In the next 5 years, we are supposed to add 3.9 gigawatts. Think about that. Adding the size of the company. Kind of wonder, what did we do the last 130 years, right? The next 5, we're adding another 3.9, almost a little over 50% growth. That's a tremendous growth that we're adding to the company. And when you think about what these other data centers, Microsoft and Vantage, and how much land they have, we potentially in the next 5 years after that could add another 3 to 4 gigawatts, maybe up to 5 gigawatts. So a tremendous growth in the industry, which is, when you think about it, the more gigawatts we sell or megawatts we sell, the bigger footprint we have to spread across the footprint to help other customers. But the big question is, we get several questions. Why do the slides go fast? Oh, in addition to that though, we have a lot of other growth. In addition to Microsoft, Oracle, and Vantage, the entire region is growing. You guys have seen this every day. And as these names come in, you can see there's a lot of economic development coming on in the region. From Eli Lilly, to Foxconn, to Uline, to brand new companies into the area. And then of course we've got Haribo, so on one side of the street we're adding gummy bears, and on the other side of the street we're showing people how to lose weight. So we kind of have a natural monopoly here, a natural competition. But a lot of great growth in the area. And when you think about the growth, it's not only the data center growth, it's the jobs that all these people bring. So the jobs are coming in with the Microsoft and Oracle, but when you look at the jobs like Eli Lilly's bringing in and Haribo is expanding, that's a lot of jobs, which adds residential load, residential taxpayers, access to other benefits throughout the community. So a lot of questions we get, there's basically two. The first question, will data centers pay their fair share? We just had a commission decision happen in the last couple of weeks called the Very Large Customer Tariff. And the foundation of our Very Large Customer Tariff from day one was we gotta make sure these customers are paying their fair share. So you think about two customers bringing about 50% of an increase in load. We've gotta make sure they're paying all the costs. The good thing is all the customers have said they're gonna pay their fair share or their full share. They have never backed down from one of those agreements with us. So we set it up and we said, well, you gotta pay all the costs, but we're building a lot of assets. We're putting in new generation, we're putting in new solar, wind, gas generation, batteries. And I know this AI thing is really good and you guys are really confident in it, but what if you become 100% more efficient in 5 years? What if the world changes, that there's another new product 10 years from now? We said you gotta sign up for paying your full share, but if things go away and we put a renewable asset in and it's for 20 years, that asset lasts, let's say 40 years or 35 years, if we put it in for 20, you gotta pay for that full 20 years. And a gas asset, you have to pay for the depreciable life. So that means if for some reason you go away, you have to write one big check to pay for all those assets so it do not have any great effect on our other customers. So you gotta protect the other customers. So this is billions of dollars they're signing up for. So for some reason, one of them would go away, they would have to pay the net book value of all those assets so we don't have a stranded asset for any other customers. To put it in perspective, we were going through this and looking at how much these large customers are gonna pay over the next couple of years. And we filed a rate case, you saw the rate case, but then we looked at, are we allocating all their costs to pay the full amount? And we are. And it's about 1.8 to 1.9 billion they're gonna pay over the next 2 years. So they're definitely paying their full amount. The other question we get, and it started with the data centers, is water consumption. So the initial thing were data centers use a lot of water, and they use a tremendous amount of water. And when you talk to Microsoft and you talk to Oracle, they're like, we use a closed loop system. And that closed loop system means it's like a radiator. We don't use a lot of water. In fact, Oracle says it's about as much as 65 houses. Down at Mount Pleasant, they said it's about 4 swimming pools a year, very little water. So now the story was, yeah, the data centers, they don't use much water, but those darn utilities, they have to use water to cool their systems, right? And I'm like, well, I don't think we're using that much more water. So we did the research. Since 2015, that's the date we did the Integris acquisition, we used a lot of water because it does take water to cool stuff, right? But we've actually reduced our water consumption from 2015 to our projection here in 2030 to be down about 25 to 30%. So think about that. We have actually closed some coal plants, new solar, new wind, batteries really don't use much water, right? They don't use any water. And then we're putting in some backup generation called combustion turbines, use very little water, and they're only gonna run probably less than 20% of the time, just the days when the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow or we have extreme temperatures. But our water usage projection by 2030 shows a decline in water, about 30%. So, we've started to talk to people who've been claiming this and show, let's look at our data. And the data just doesn't support water usages growing dramatically. And in fact, we've really reduced water. So, just a couple takeaways here. Data centers are paying their fair share, right? Water is not an issue. And when you think about the times we have here, I just had a meeting talking about AI. AI is reshaping the world, and we're going to hear a lot more of that today. I mean, it's incredible on what we're doing internally to think about AI, how we're thinking about it for our customers, how we're thinking to make the business even more efficient, how I'm thinking about how I could book my Vegas trip when I wanted to. You know, there's a lot of things that AI is going to help us with. So I really appreciate everyone being at the Public Service Building. Looking forward to this afternoon. And I think our lunches have arrived, right? So I think we're good. Do we let people get lunch, or you want to organize it?
Thank you, Scott. And lunch has arrived. I'm going to ask our front row to go first because you're all speaking soon. So if you guys can go, and then other tables can follow. Thanks. We hope you all have enjoyed your table discussion. I know at ours we were having a conversation on how AI can assist in many ways and how universities have to monitor that. As I've got my junior in college coming home for the summer, I was thinking through all the usage that she's used AI for and how do you police that. I hope you all have enjoyed the conversation and getting to know one another. And again, thank you to Scott and Peggy for hosting us. Thank you to my team for helping to make sure the food got here. I really appreciate that. Wisconsin Energy Public Service Building has long stood at the center of the systems that power our region, as Scott mentioned today. It's a fitting place to consider the next chapter of that story. For more than a century, this building has symbolized how infrastructure, innovation, and economic growth come together in Milwaukee. It is especially appropriate that we gather here as we look ahead to a new kind of infrastructure, one that is less visible than rail lines or power plants, but just as essential to our future. As data center investment accelerates across Wisconsin, our state is emerging as a hub in a rapidly expanding digital infrastructure economy. Driven by demand for artificial intelligence, cloud computing, and secure data storage, both new and long-established Wisconsin companies are bringing significant capital investment, construction activity, and long-term job opportunities to our region. This moment presents real opportunity, but also real responsibility. We must ask ourselves how we position our workforce, strengthen our infrastructure, and align our supply chain to take full advantage of this growth while ensuring it is managed sustainably and in ways that benefit our communities. Today's discussion is designed to help us answer those questions. We will explore what data centers are, how they operate, what their growth means for local economy. We will touch on critical considerations like energy demand, resource use, and the infrastructure required to support this expansion. And just as importantly, we will examine how businesses and education partners are preparing for what comes next. Today, we are joined by an outstanding group of leaders who bring expertise across industry, education, energy, and impact and community impact. And they draw a very large crowd. Today's speaker includes Kevin Chandler, Director of Government and Regulatory Affairs, North America, Vantage Data Center. Dr. Anthony Cruz, President, Milwaukee Area Technical College. Mark Johnson, VP of Innovation and Technology, Modine. Teresa Mogensen, President and CEO, American Transmission Company. And Gil Perry, President and CEO of Children's Wisconsin. And Jason Stein, President, Wisconsin Public Policy Forum. Jason Stein will moderate a discussion with our speakers to help us better understand how digital infrastructure is reshaping the economy landscape in our region. First, we will hear from Jason on a recent report from the Wisconsin Public Policy Forum on data centers. Following Jason's overview, we will be joined by Kevin Chandler from Vantage to learn more about why they chose Wisconsin and their plans for their site. Please welcome Jason Stein.
All right, well, thank you, Christy and Heather, everyone at GMC, as well as We Energies for having us here. I'm going to give you very quickly for just a couple minutes our forum research on power and water usage by data centers. And you can find it for free on our website. And we're doing a larger study that will be going through this summer and that will look at broader issues related to data center siting. You know, the forum's a very old organization. We're nonpartisan on data centers and every other issue. We don't advocate for or against specific policy positions. Go ahead. You know, we are a membership organization, so many members in the room, and thank you for your support. If your organization is not a member, Elizabeth Szynski, our Director of Business and Community Operations, is here and in back and would be delighted to talk to you more about it. So if you have questions, I'm going to move quickly on this. You can always talk to me after the session. Go ahead. So to just give you some basic context, we have dozens of data centers that are already up and running in Wisconsin. The difference is, and these are, it's worth noting, not just for AI, but for established companies. Epic Systems in Verona is a good example. You know, insurance companies of the types of legacy companies that are using data centers already, but obviously there is a difference in scale, as we've heard, whereas some of these hyperscale data centers could be using close to or at 1 gigawatt hour of power a year, which is, you know, you think kilowatts, 1,000 kilowatts is a megawatt, 1,000 megawatts is a gigawatt hour. Another way of just thinking about it is one of these hyperscale centers could use maybe 1.5% of the power that's currently being produced in the state, something like that. For a little bit, and you know, as we've heard, you know, we've seen estimates that data centers could use something like 4% of the electricity consumed in the US as of a year or two ago, and that by 2028 they could use in the 7 to 12% range. I mean, these are all estimates, but certainly it's going to be a significant increase. But it's worth talking about what was the context prior to these hyperscale centers arriving on the scene. And, you know, it was a falling sales environment. So here you can see total electricity sales by Wisconsin utilities in megawatt hours, millions of megawatt hours over the past 20 years. And what you see here is that energy sales from 05 to 2024 fell 9%, led by a slightly larger drop in industrial and commercial users. This is as manufacturing outfits get more energy efficient. As some manufacturing leaves the state, you have the same thing happening in the residential sphere where things are getting more efficient and so on and so forth. Peak demand also fell from a high of 15 gigawatts in 2006 to 14.6 gigawatts in 2024. As we heard Scott say, you know, we're expecting several gigawatts of power to be added over the next several years. But here's just a look at, so okay, first the slide you just saw was falling sales in megawatt hours. Here's the associated gross revenue by year, inflation adjusted into $2025. And so what you can see here is just there has been an inflation adjusted decline, or if you want to think about it as just being flat in nominal terms, but inflation adjusted revenues being down 15% statewide from their peak in 2011. So, you know, even though the amount of power being purchased has gone down, you know, the state, as we heard, we still have generation and transmission investments that we have to make as a state. And prior to the data centers, it's important to remember that our context for those investments was we were going to have to do it by spreading them across fewer megawatt hours that we were selling and less revenue, at least on an inflation-adjusted basis. So it's worth noting that that wasn't a picnic either, that we had a separate set of challenges that went with that context. We can go on to the next slide. You know, we talked a little bit already, we heard a little bit already about water usage. It's worth noting that, you know, we are a Midwest, upper Midwest state, manufacturing roots, and what this chart just shows is billions of gallons of water sold by water utilities in Wisconsin by type The light blue is residential, the dark blue is industrial. And we have seen since 1997 to 2022, which is when we did this research, a drop of billions of gallons, more than 30 billion gallons over that time period of water sold. So it's like an 18% drop. So, when we think about, even if we assume some of the upper end estimates and we think, a hyperscale data center could use a few million gallons of water a year, it's worth putting that in that larger perspective. And again, this is just, we have industry that's left the state, and then everybody else, the remaining industry, residential, commercial, whatever, is more water efficient than it was a generation ago. Go ahead. Here's just a look at change in billions of gallons sold by just municipal water utility. The one I always highlight here is Racine. The Racine Waterworks from 1997 to now, over a generation, was down something like 2 billion gallons of water sold. So, many hundreds of times more than even, or hundreds of times more than even like a large estimate to what the Mount Pleasant data center might use. Go ahead. And then we're going to just quickly run through, we already got a little bit on regulation, but I'll just quickly say we have a larger, we can give more information about the different regulatory bodies that provide oversight of data centers. But you have the PSC, which approves utility rate increases and special rates for large users, and it approves construction of generating and transmission assets. You have water regulation of the municipal water utilities also being done by the PSC. Go ahead. You had the April 24th decision that the PSC had. This was the We Energies decision that Scott referenced. And sometimes we get jargon in public policy, but they get points for a very large customer. Very easy to understand that. And you can read for yourself there, but the bottom line for this decision and the Alliant Energy decision is that the PSC was imposing additional protections for the current ratepayers, as well as obligations ultimately for the data center customers. And that we still need to have the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission make decisions on transmission, but we've already had these decisions from the PSC. Go ahead. And there was also on May, just a few days ago, there was our decision that the PSC made on the Alliant Energy application to serve the Beaver Dam Meta Power Center. Again, slightly different details in terms of the decision, but the big picture for you all is that additional both obligations on the data center as well as reporting requirements ultimately. Here's just a look at some other agencies that have some regulatory oversight. Go on to the next one. And then here's a look at something that's gotten a fair amount in the news lately, discussion, which is the sales tax exemptions that have been going for the state sales taxes on the equipment being and other materials being purchased for the data centers. The state WEDC allocates those sales tax exemptions for data centers in the state. You can see them there, have already received those allocations. Go ahead. That materials covered include computer servers, networking equipment, cooling equipment, other personal property in these data centers. It's worth noting that manufacturers also receive in Wisconsin similar sales tax exemptions. So sometimes this is presented as something that is unique or exclusive to data centers. There are other sales tax exemptions in state law. The state Legislative Fiscal Bureau, which is like our Congressional Budget Office, has estimated the foregone sales tax revenues over the next several years at being $1.5 billion for the state, and that on an ongoing basis after that, it would be something like $370 million. It's worth noting this is not money that the state is paying out. It's only the sales tax exemption only happens if the materials and the equipment is actually purchased. The state does have a lot of ways that it can potentially recoup this foregone revenue, which includes everything related to the construction, whether it's the income taxes paid by the workers, paid by the construction companies, certain sales taxes that get generated from that. There may be, for these data centers, we think there would be a corporate nexus, that there would be, if there's profits associated with the operation of the data centers, state corporate taxes on those, as well as there are utility taxes that the state collects on generating facilities that are built to serve, whether it's a data center or any other customer, as well as the local property taxes that will happen. Okay, coming to my final slide here, because I want to be respectful of time and leave that most of the session for our panelists, but there have been also some changes in state law that have exempted data centers to exceed the maximum limit in the state's tax increment finance district rules, which is currently at 12% of equalized value in a community. And you might ask, well, why would you need this? Wouldn't there be some communities where you wouldn't have to exempt? And the simple answer is not necessarily, because these data centers are at a scale that's, even for those of us who work with big numbers routinely, hard to imagine. So if you think about the Port Washington data center, the investment there, the capital investment, has been projected to be roughly $15 billion. Now that includes both the real estate, the land, and the personal property, to my understanding. And so it's not exactly apples to apples with the property value data that is kept by the state. But if you look at the city of Green Bay, just the real property, the land and improvements in the city of Green Bay, it's less than $12 billion. So that kind of gives you a sense of the scale that we're talking about here of the investment, whether the state chooses to accept it or in some other cases not. So with that, I will now call up Kevin Chandler of Vantage Data Centers, their Director of Government Affairs and Regulatory.
Hey everyone, it is great to be here today. I apologize in advance. I don't have any great slides, so we'll just wanted to have the chance to provide an overview of who Vantage is, how we wound up in Wisconsin in advance of this panel, and just starting off, thank you so much to GMC for inviting us. Delighted to be here and meet a lot of interesting people in this room. Vantage Data Centers was formed in 2010. At the simplest level, we develop, build, and operate data centers, which we view as really the digital foundation for the modern economy. Data centers power every part of our lives these days, from cloud computing to supporting emergency response to national security, and increasingly they're using for advanced computing capabilities such as artificial intelligence. And I think we view this as a really exciting opportunity to help build infrastructure that supports the new economy, that supports research, that supports science, that supports everything that can come through this technology. And at the end of the day, our goal is to be a partner for, yes, our customers, but also our communities. And we do this through our commitment to responsible growth. And that really is founded on 3 pillars. Number 1, which has been talked about already today, is ratepayer protection, ensuring that we are picking up the tab for the infrastructure associated with our projects. Second pillar is investing in our communities, having meaningful long-term partnerships with the communities where we're building these projects. We do operate them long-term. Vantage will be in these communities for decades to come. And advancing sustainability. We talked about water use, but also how can we be water positive? How can we make these sites as biodiverse as possible so that they're contributing more to the environment around them than the land did beforehand? And in Wisconsin, that really manifests itself through our Lighthouse project in Port Washington, which is under construction now. That project will create 4,000 Union First construction jobs during the construction period, and projecting approximately 1,000 operations jobs over the long term. This project is part of the Stargate initiative, so we're developing it alongside our partners at Oracle and OpenAI. So some of those jobs will be ours, others will be our customers. And that's a really significant increase in employment opportunity for Ozaukee County and for the Milwaukee region. And this project really is sustainability first. Talked about the very large load tariff and how we are essentially walling off those costs. We're investing in approximately 2 gigawatts of capacity, 30% of which will flow back to Wisconsin customers. That 2 gigawatts is primarily clean. It is clean capacity, wind and solar and battery resources. And we are already investing in sustainability on the ground, so the project itself will have use of about 20,000 gallons of water a day. For context, that is less water than the Port Saukville School District uses on a daily basis as well. And we have announced a $3 million investment into restoring the Valley Creek corridor in Port Washington that will improve recreation access, but also flooding resilience into the area, and really embracing the idea of a water positive site. And we're also investing in the community. Recently, with our partners at Oracle and OpenAI, we announced a joint investment to help reseed the Port Saukville Education Foundation, which will provide grants and other opportunities for teachers, hopefully increasing the use of technology in that school district, and also providing more flexible funding to help them bridge some of the gaps that they haven't been able to in recent history. And so we're really excited about this opportunity. We're really excited about Wisconsin. We're really excited to be here today and hopefully answer questions and talk more about what we're doing. And we have a great panel, and thank you for having us.
All right, well, thank you, Kevin, and I'll just call up now all of our panelists to come up. If you come up, you can collect a water if you want one, and then your microphones, you will need to turn them on by flipping the switch, which is right below the red line. All right, well, as luck would have it, Kevin and Mark landed right here next to me, and I do have the first question for them. What a great panel, by the way. Very lucky to have all of you here assembled on one stage. For you both, could you speak to, I think many people are somewhat surprised by all the data center development. It's coming very quickly. And they may be asking themselves, well, why is it happening here? So if you could just talk a little bit about what are the specific advantages that our state and this region of the state has that has attracted these investments? And what do you think that signals about the futures of both the data center industries and the broader economy in this region, the rest of the state? Go ahead.
There we go. Kevin, I'll give you a little break. Did a great job, I think, talking about some of these table stakes in terms of having the energy, the natural resources, and how you take care of them. But beyond that, I think the climate, when we think about the thermal management of the data center, which is absolutely critical to its operation, when done correctly, can help reduce the amount of energy it needs. Our climate is a friendlier climate for these data centers than some of the other regions in the United States and across the world. And then, of course, we have great universities and technical schools that can provide the skilled labor that we need to not only stand up the data centers, but to continue to maintain them over time.
Yeah, no, great answer. We've obviously talked a little bit about the infrastructure already, and that's a really important part of it. But ultimately, it really is about the people. I think Wisconsin is very well positioned from a workforce perspective to be able to welcome and absorb these kinds of developments. There's a strong union workforce, a lot of experience, construction activity in Wisconsin, a lot of great contractors. And then for the skilled jobs that will come down the road in the operations period. You have the Milwaukee region, which is, I think, increasingly setting itself apart. You have access to universities like the Wisconsin system. And I think that really does set Wisconsin up for opportunity, not just now during this development phase, but also long-term supporting the operations of the facilities, but also the work that goes on around them, whether that's manufacturing generators that provide backup power to sites, whether it's manufacturing cooling systems like Johnson Controls, or whether that's really taking and leveraging the research that's coming out of these, like you're seeing, coming out of the Wisconsin systems. I think the people in Wisconsin and this region are really important.
Well, great. I mean, obviously, a lot of the discussion in the public policy space is appropriately about power. So Teresa, you are our panelist for that. So let's talk about what this investment will mean for current infrastructure. How are we going to meet the demand for power? And how do we balance reliability and affordability as we try to do that?
There are a couple of many questions involved in that, but let me start by just talking a little bit about transmission, the part that I represent. Transmission is the grid, big grid, if you will, the high voltage, large facilities that you see along the freeways and going cross country. Transmission is all about scale. It's large quantities of power moving long distances. So our job is to take power from all the sources, so the power generation, power plants, all around the area, connect that with all the users, all the distribution systems, all the customers, like We Energies is one of our customers, Alliant Energy is one of our customers. We are the ones who are charged with taking all the power in and delivering the power to where it's being distributed. So not all the way to your house or to your business, unless you're a large business like a data center. We do that, but so we are balancing all of that usage at any given time. So the key with transmission is that it allows for options and it allows for moving this large quantity of power. So we have to build to connect new customers like the data centers, and we also have to reinforce other areas in the grid that might be away from where the data center is located, because that's how the power flows. That's the physics of it to enable it coming in. So we are part of what is termed critical infrastructure. So we're governed federally for a lot of aspects for transmission. The state governs our siting of facilities, but as far as rates that are charged for transmission, standards that we have to build to, how we handle a lot of different aspects of our operations, that's federally governed. So that makes it a little bit different. So we work carefully with We Energies and others on how to coordinate those items. So we talked before about how much additional demand this is. So obviously it's requiring additional facilities. So we do have facilities to build, and then Scott talked about how the question of who pays and how is it paid. And our aspect of that is to support essentially the share of that grid capacity that is being used by the data center, or that is being increased to support the data center, to make sure that, consistent with how they're using share of power plants and other, that they are also going to pay equivalently for that share of the grid capacity. Now, I think about a grid, everything is pouring in there, mixing together and moving. You can't really trace, well, these are his electrons. And so we really do billing based on essentially a load share of demand. And just we're trying to make sure, in partnership with We Energies and our other distribution and generation utilities, that we can line up that share of grid costs with that same commitment that the data center customer, very large customers, are using to pay for their share of the generation and other aspects.
And you talked a little bit about how FERC regulates use of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and we could look for a decision or at least a case upcoming there, right? For that that you guys may try to pursue in the same way that We Energies and Alliant Energy have pursued it at the state level with the PSC. Is that right?
That's right. We will be in a few weeks actually filing some proposed agreements with the FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, for approval to support the approach that Scott talked about for We Energies and the other ATC customers. We're striving similarly for a consistent approach that will apply to all of the customers that are similarly situated. And we should, there's a lot of interest across the country, obviously, in FERC and saying, how should this be done? We think this approach that we have come up with for our area is very logical and very aligned with all the principles that FERC uses to determine fairness of a rate, essentially that the cost causer pays for the facilities. And so we're trying to memorialize that, and that in turn provides some certainty then for all the customers and for the very large customers who are paying the bills on what their financial obligations are and avoiding that cost shift.
As we think about having these data centers in Wisconsin, a lot of the debate, and this is appropriate, is about the cost and the investment and so forth. But, one thing that doesn't come up as much is what are the potential benefits of having, a $15 billion investment in the case of the Lighthouse project in Port Washington in our state. So I wonder if both Mark and Kevin could just speak to what might be some of the benefits that the residents of Wisconsin or the companies, so on and so forth, educational institutions might get from having these investments made here as opposed to elsewhere.
Good question. And certainly the technology and innovation is where I spend all my time professionally. So when I see the opportunity to have data centers like this right in the backyard, close to all the industry that we have across Wisconsin, close to our great university system, it's a recipe that starts to come together where you can explore what comes next from an efficiency standpoint, again, from thermal management to energy power delivery to the compute. We're in a bit of a race right now to deploy and get enough compute out there. There'll be another chapter where there'll be an opportunity to really work on that efficiency and probably even have AI help with solving that problem. And I think the university partnerships and local area technical schools will play a big role in that. There'll be opportunities for joint projects, certainly new products, new types of controls that are development, and really defining what the jobs of tomorrow look like.
Yeah, certainly. I think from just the benefit to the area, obviously with projects as large as these, you do have significant local tax revenue and job creation impact. We've talked about some of that. I think also long-term, there really is an opportunity for increased collaboration, coming from this access to tech talent and tech operations that really has the chance to level up the region over the long term. And I think that's a really important piece of these projects through the operations period. I think for Vantage, what we look at is how can we immediately come in and begin building partnerships in the community on the front end. And so that has involved, again, that supporting of education, supporting the education foundation, supporting local initiatives, and then working with folks to figure out what can come next. I think also, just going back to the jobs, one other interesting thing is that I've had the chance to talk to and work with a lot of people on the site, and there are a lot of people that I've run into who are from the area, and they're having the chance to, maybe they've been building data centers in other states for a long time, and they're having the chance to come here and work back in their communities for the first time, in some cases ever. And that's a really exciting opportunity as well, that you're bringing, you can bring people back into the community and create long-term lasting impact.
And I realize in some ways it may be kind of a funny question to say, besides the $15 billion investment, is there anything of value for the local region? But let's put it to, since we talked about workforce, let's put it to Tony and Gil, both in, you each run a major institution in its own right, and then you have both the workforce issues and other technology issues that you grapple with, either in terms of, Tony, in terms of being able to train workers of the future at MATC in maybe being able to use this technology in other ways. Could you both speak to what you see as some of the potential benefits, or if there are drawbacks as well, but just the trade-offs of having this investment in the region?
I think this is a great opportunity for our institution and other institutions of higher education to contribute to the ecosystem that's being created. And really is about looking at an opportunity for us to create more short-term credentials, apprenticeships, and other two-year programs that are aligned with the needs of industry, particularly if we're talking about data centers, AI, the technology. But that's not just in those, we're looking at the trades, right? Being a very important piece of that, electrical, HVAC, as well as looking at IT, cybersecurity, great opportunities for us to be able to build pathways that will enable individuals to connect them to jobs that are being created by this new ecosystem. I think also it's a great opportunity for us to really have better alignment, intentional alignment with our industry partners, local governments, in order to really deliver on these types of new educational opportunities that are needed in order to fuel this new ecosystem.
Gil?
We have a concept at Children's that if we're not digital, we're invisible, because a majority of our patients and families, as well as our team members, are digital natives. And so it's really important for us to be proactive in this space. Historically, the healthcare industry has been very reactive based on who comes to us, et cetera. Now most are in the proactive space. We're now trending towards the predictive space. And so data will enable us to be much, much more precise. We have concepts that we are currently using and evolving specifically around administrative roles. I can decrease 20% of the burden of what it takes a physician or a nurse to do their work. That's 20% more that they can spend with patients or with each other or going to a soccer game with their family. Burnout's a big issue in our industry. So we're really admiring what we can do in the administrative space. In the clinical space, we're able to also use it to be much more precise in our diagnosis and how quickly it takes for us to get to an answer. We're an Epic shop, and we are part of this Cosmos environment that allows us to literally have the benefit of 2,000 hospitals, 300 million patients, and 2 billion patient visits. All de-identified, of course, but that allows us to identify patients like these, and specifically rare disease patients, where we used to take years to be able to identify like patients. Maybe there's only 20 in the whole country. Now with a click of a button, safely, we're able to do that. And then in the research space, obviously our mission is to continue with discovery. We're able to do research proactively like we've never done before. And so in general, it allows us to be much more proactive. I use the example that if you give me 3 data points, and a zip code, I can tell you exactly how healthy a child's gonna be. And so, for example, third grade reading level, 8th grade math scores, and dental records. And obviously give me where they live, and we can tell you with 95% confidence how healthy that child's gonna be. So you can imagine in the future how quickly we can move forward in caring for kids with data.
Okay. Another area that has come up today, but it'd be good to zero in on, is just the environmental footprint of these data centers and the facilities that would serve them on the transmission and generation side. And so if just Mark, Kevin, and Teresa would just speak briefly to, maybe starting with Mark, what you feel like we may see in terms of developments with the environmental impact going forward.
Again, I think you did a great job setting up an environmental impact, and of course the data centers are going to use power, they're going to use water, but there's a wide variety of different power architectures, thermal architectures, and even different types of compute. Again, we broadly talk about this as AI, but it comes in different forms for high-performance compute, machine learning, all kinds of different use cases, from things we do on our cell phones to autonomous vehicles to drug research. So I think it's important to understand those different use cases, or at least be aware of them, because it impact the type of the data center and how we can efficiently provide the power and the thermal management. And in some of these use cases where it is a higher amount of energy and water usage, we can start to focus in on opportunities to do things like waste heat recovery, redirect some of this heat that's being absorbed to use it for some other positive use, or even energy recovery. So there's a lot of different types of technology that we can continue to deploy to continue to minimize any environmental impact.
Yeah, maybe I could add from kind of the perspective of the grid again, and opportunity to utilize all kinds of diverse types of resources in play. I mean, in building the grid, we do all the things that we can to protect the environment around our facilities, which are, power lines out there. But maybe the real opportunity is to help have the best mix of power at any given time that is able to be delivered to meet customer need, that has the least environmental impact, or has whatever are the attributes that are most desired by the policies that are enforced in any given place. Having a strong grid that lets you move power around from different resources, that's the whole job that we have, is to serve the available demand with the least cost power and the power sources that meet policy and other requirements at any given time. So a strong grid will enable many more times its cost, if you will, in ability to deliver to those requirements.
Okay, great. And we heard a little bit from Gil and Tony about potential benefits for your institutions. Both of you are in very sort of community-minded leadership positions. Are there things that you see that we could be doing as a region to better leverage this investment that's going to happen and get, better outcomes, whether it's for your stakeholders or for the community at large?
I think the opportunity for our community is to really lean in, obviously do it with sustainability and responsibility in mind. The fact is that these are going to happen, and whether Wisconsin and Milwaukee wants to take advantage of it is the question. The question is not when, it's exponential. And so we were talking at a board meeting not long ago, and we were talking about over the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to develop this roadmap. And we had somebody say, how about 3 to 5 months? Okay, so when we talk about exponential, this is happening very quickly, and so I think there's a big opportunity. And then, there are obviously challenges on both sides. If you think about the potential to use precision and precision medicine and what that means for individuals, I think you have to embrace that and see what it can do to our industry.
Opportunity for higher education institutions like MATC is really about those pathways that I talked about before, and really trying to capitalize on the fact on how do we get our students that are in K through 12 more exposure to AI and technology early on, right? Then in addition to that, leverage existing partnerships like M-Cubed, which we've had with MPS and UWM, trying to see how we can leverage that and trying to make sure that we're taking full advantage of that. And also just those partnerships, right? We currently have about 90 advisory councils at MATC that inform us about how do we align our curriculum with the needs of industry, and how do we leverage that better. There's an opportunity there to work closer with industry and finding out how we can then get people trained in those jobs that are needed. Right now we know that there are some that we can identify that we know are necessary in order for us to power that ecosystem when it comes to people and getting the right jobs. But there are so many changes coming on the horizon. Keeping very nimble is an opportunity as well to make sure that we're doing that. And to do that, we always have to be listening to our industry partners. We want to make sure that we are leveraging that to make sure that our individuals that are either upskilling or just coming, or people that are already in the industries that we're serving, how do they get the training that they need? So one thing that we're doing is through our workforce solutions, which is really our non-credit side of the colleges, how can we ramp that up even more in order to really rapid response when it comes to these skill building types of activities that we need to do as a college.
Great. And Tony referenced apprenticeship programs and other workforce pathways. We have an ongoing project with WRTP Big Step to look at apprenticeships in a range of different industries, and those reports are available for free on our website as well if you want to check those out. When we look at data centers, often some of the proposals, as we've seen, have a number of protections for the public built in, whether that's ratepayers, whether that's local property taxpayers in a given community. At the same time, despite maybe in some cases some favorable provisions, the response is not always favorable from the public. And so, could the panel speak to things that they think might help to, or just should be done to respond to the skepticism that you sometimes see greeting proposals around data centers? And I'll just put that out to anybody that wants to jump in.
I can start. So one thing to keep in mind too when we're adding very large customers, remember I talked about share of grid or share of load? Costs are going up anyway, regardless of the data centers, because of investment that's needed to support just continuing reliable operations for everyone and supporting the growth that is there otherwise. The data centers coming in are not only covering their own share, they're covering a larger share if you add them into the mix than you otherwise would have had. So you have more entities sharing the cost of a much stronger grid in our case, and that results in you paying less than you otherwise would because you have another entity paying. So that's just another aspect of the cost piece that sometimes people don't realize that it's a positive.
One thing I'll add is the economic development of this. If you think about the talent that we're going to be able to recruit as a result of adopting this, it's really impactful. And as a matter of fact, we are potentially going to lose talent if we don't aggressively adopt this technology. In the medical field, it's really difficult to recruit talent, top talent, especially children's. We're one of the top in the country. I literally talked to a neurologist who said, unless you have these pieces in place, I can't come to you, because his current site has a lot of data-informed, data predictive analytics that supports his practice. And so it's going to be the new capital that we have to deploy.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll speak from the data center development side. I think ultimately we have to do a good job at engaging the community on the ground. We have to meet with people where they are and have real conversations, and we have to really do an excellent job communicating the facts of the project. I know we've talked about water sort of ad nauseum today, but that really is an area that is still a big source of misinformation. I talk to people every day who are still surprised that we are not building a pipeline directly into Lake Michigan. And that is something that I feel like it's easy to think that because we've said it a bunch of times that it really breaks through, but it doesn't. You have to be out there, you have to be consistent, you have to be transparent, you have to be active. I think that's our job here and everywhere really is to answer the tough questions about what these projects are and be out there with readily accessible, clear communication. We are working to get more data up on the website in terms of what's happening on the construction site on a day-to-day basis, making sure that folks have access to the information, making sure they know who they can call if they have a question about something that's happening in the area. And that takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of effort, but it's absolutely worth it because we are, we're here, we want to be part of the community, we want to be members of the community, and that's really like 98% of it is showing up and just being visible.
Well, great. Well, as we look ahead, it's always worth with any public policy issue thinking 5-10 years out, what do things look like if we're on the right track? And on a more moderate time scale, 2 to 3 years out, how do we know we're on the right track? So if I'll just put that out to all of you, we got about 5 minutes here, and just to hear from the 5 of you about what does success look like and how do we know we're headed toward that? Mark, do you want to start?
Sure. I think in the next 2 to 3 years, we should see more of this collaboration that we talked about. It should be evident that we're seeing more small businesses, more universities engaged, and again, events like this are a great way to highlight that. It's sometimes easy to miss some of those things happening in the background, and then I think we'll be able to see industry continuing to stay and flourish. Again, having this recipe of the data centers here right in our backyard. The relationships with the universities and the tech schools, supplying the talent, allowing those that are in a leadership position to stay there, and ideally those that are here already and even new companies that are coming in to take advantage of this recipe to be successful as well. I think that's the longer term barometer of success that I expect to see.
I think the barometer of success is projects that are operating and contributing to the community and part of the community. And it is a strong workforce pipeline to support these projects through construction and operation. I'm really happy to hear Tony's perspective on this, because I cannot stress enough how this industry creates jobs all across the spectrum, from high school diplomas all the way to PhDs. There's so much opportunity, and this really is one of the big blue-collar opportunities in history. And so I think success really is projects that are moving forward with local support and with a strong local workforce backing them.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, success for us is all of your success, is powering all the things that you want to do, and powering essentially what's a data utility, which is powering a lot of the things you want to do too, is part of what we're trying to do. So if we can do that successfully in a way that contributes to the vibrancy of the economy and the security and all the other dimensions of this area that critical infrastructure supports, then I think that'll be a success.
3 to 5 years from now, Wisconsin, Milwaukee has got a part of our brand that we're welcoming data and technology forward-thinking companies to be a leader in this space, not a laggard, and then really using it to apply to improve human lives, period. And so through all of our industries, we have that opportunity.
Tony, close this out.
Yeah, I think in the next 3 to 5, really to establish a clear talent pipeline that individuals out there in our community know there are on-ramps and off-ramps from an educational standpoint, knowing what those are, and then connecting as well with industry to make sure that pipeline is very clear. And I hope that in 10 years, we're really a national model of how we've integrated and aligned workforce, education, and industry.
Okay, well, thank you to our fantastic panelists. Thank you to GMC for having us and WEC for hosting this event. And with that, I will dismiss the panel and bring up our chairman, Dave Anderson, to close us out.
I didn't realize how tall you were, Jason. Many thanks to all of our speakers today. I know our members enjoyed the dialogue. Conversations like this matter because the digital infrastructure economy is not a distant trend. It's already reshaping how we compete, hire, invest, and grow. Understanding the scale of this change from energy demand to workforce readiness positions us to make strong decisions. Thanks for all of you being part of our discussions today, for your continued leadership in shaping Milwaukee's economic future. Thanks again to Scott, Peggy, and the whole WEC team for hosting us today. We'll see you at our next meeting on June 8th at Marquette University. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.